Texas, 1878. The wind had been screaming across Red Hollow for 3 straight days. Dust rolled across the empty plains like smoke, striking wooden fences, rattling loose shutters, and burying the old wagon tracks beneath layers of red dirt. At night, the temperature dropped sharply, and the darkness seemed to swallow everything beyond the faint glow of the stars. At the far edge of that lonely country stood a weather-beaten ranch surrounded by dead grass and twisted mesquite trees. Black Creek Ranch. Most people in Red Hollow knew the place. But almost nobody was willing to go there. Not because the ranch was abandoned. Because of the man who lived inside it. His name was Elias Crowe. For almost 10 years, newspapers and wanted posters had described Elias as one of the most dangerous outlaws in Texas. They said he had robbed stagecoaches. They said he had killed bounty hunters. They said he had burned ranches belonging to men who crossed him. Some claimed he had buried so many bodies that nobody knew the exact number. Children in nearby towns were warned about him. Mothers used his name to frighten their sons into coming home before dark. But the strangest part of the legend was something nobody knew. Elias Crowe had never killed a man. Not once. He had fired warning shots. He had broken bones. He had beaten men who came looking for trouble. But whenever he had the chance to pull the trigger, he had stopped. Nobody knew why. And Elias had never explained himself. On a cold night in late October, Elias was sitting alone beside the fireplace when he heard something outside. 3 knocks. Slow. Heavy. His hand immediately moved toward the revolver lying beside his chair. He waited. Nothing. Then came 3 more knocks. Elias stood. The fire behind him threw a long shadow across the wooden floor. He walked toward the front door without making a sound. He had lived alone for years. Nobody came to Black Creek Ranch after sunset. And anyone who did usually came carrying a gun. Elias stopped beside the door. Who is it? Silence. His fingers tightened around the revolver. Answer me. A woman's voice finally came through the wood. My name is Clara Bell. Elias frowned. He didn't recognize the name. Go home. I can't. Then find somewhere else. I came here for you. Elias slowly opened the door. A young woman stood on the porch. She appeared to be around 25 years old. Her brown coat was soaked from the rain, and mud covered the bottom of her boots. A dark blue scarf was wrapped tightly around her neck. She looked exhausted. But she wasn't frightened. That caught Elias's attention. Most people who stood on his porch at midnight couldn't hide their fear. This woman didn't seem afraid of him at all. Elias kept the revolver pointed toward the ground. Who sent you? My father. What's his name? She looked directly into his eyes. Samuel Bell. Elias's expression changed. For a moment, he said nothing. Samuel Bell is dead. I know. How long? 6 days. The wind blew between them. Elias finally asked, how did he die? The sheriff said bandits killed him. Elias studied her face. And you don't believe that? No. Why? Because my father told me they were coming for him. Elias looked toward the dark road behind her. Who? I don't know. Then you shouldn't have come here. I had no choice. Clara reached inside her coat. Elias raised his revolver. Slowly. She stopped. Then she carefully pulled out a small envelope. I was told to give this to Elias Crowe. Elias didn't take it. Who told you? My father. He knew me. For 20 years. Elias stared at the envelope. Give it to me. She handed it over. The envelope was old and slightly torn at the edges. There was no return address. Only 3 words written across the front. For Elias Crowe. Elias closed the door behind Clara. Come inside. She entered the ranch house. Elias locked the door immediately. Clara noticed the movement. Are you expecting someone? I always expect someone. He walked to the fireplace. Clara stood several feet away, watching him. Elias opened the envelope with a small knife. Inside was 1 sheet of paper. He unfolded it. The handwriting made his blood run cold. He knew it. He had seen it before. Years ago. On letters his father had written before his death. Elias read the first line. His face became completely still. Clara watched him carefully. What does it say? Elias didn't answer. He read the letter again. Then he looked at her. Where did your father get this? He kept it hidden. Where? Beneath the floorboards of our house. Elias folded the letter. What did he tell you before he died? Clara hesitated. Then she stepped closer. He told me something I didn't understand. What? He said, find the man everyone calls a murderer. Elias stared at her. What else? He said, he is the only man who can tell you what really happened. Elias's jaw tightened. Did he say my name? Yes. The room became silent. Only the fire crackled between them. Elias walked toward the window. Outside, the rain had started again. He looked across the dark fields. Your father was searching for something. Clara nodded. He spent years looking for it. What? The truth. Elias turned toward her. About what? Clara reached into her coat. This time she pulled out something smaller. A photograph. She held it out. My father told me to show you this. Elias took it. The photograph was old and faded. 3 men stood outside a wooden building. Elias recognized the first man immediately. His father. Nathan Crowe. The second man was Samuel Bell. But the third man made Elias stop breathing. He knew that face. Every lawman in Texas had once known it. Marshal Gideon Vale. According to official records, Gideon Vale had died 20 years earlier. But in this photograph, he was standing beside Elias's father. Alive. Smiling. And holding a black leather ledger. Elias turned the photograph over. There was writing on the back. A date. June 14, 1858. Beneath it were 7 words. If anything happens, find the ledger. Elias stared at the photograph. His hands began to shake. Clara noticed. What is it? Elias didn't answer. His father had died when Elias was 16. Everyone had told him Nathan Crowe died in a gunfight. Everyone had told him his father was a criminal. Everyone had told him the Crowe family had deserved its reputation. But now Elias was looking at proof that his father had been involved in something completely different. Something powerful enough to involve a respected marshal. Something important enough for 2 men to hide a ledger. Clara quietly asked, do you know where it is? Elias looked up. Maybe. Where? He stared at the photograph one more time. Then he remembered a place from his childhood. An abandoned mining town hidden beyond the western hills. Mercy Ridge. His father had taken him there once. Elias had been only 10 years old. Before they left, his father had grabbed his shoulders and said something Elias had never forgotten. If I ever tell you to forget this place, you forget it. At the time, Elias had thought it was just another warning from his father. Now he understood. His father had been hiding something. And someone had just murdered Samuel Bell for getting too close to it. Clara stepped toward him. My father believed your father was innocent. Elias looked at her. Why? Because he spent 20 years trying to prove it. Before Elias could answer, a sound came from outside. A horse. Then another. Clara turned toward the window. Someone's here. Elias immediately extinguished the lamp. The room fell into darkness. He moved silently toward the window and looked through a narrow gap in the curtain. 2 horses stood near the barn. No riders. Elias's eyes moved across the darkness. Then he saw something hanging from the fence. A black hat. He knew it. It belonged to Deputy Tom Rusk, the sheriff's most trusted man. Elias opened the door and stepped onto the porch. The hat was soaked with rain. A small piece of paper had been pinned beneath it. He pulled it free. 5 words were written across the paper. Stop digging, Crow, or die. Elias slowly folded the message. Clara stood behind him. Who wrote that? Elias looked toward the darkness beyond the ranch. I don't know. Then he heard a distant gunshot. A horse screamed. And somewhere beyond the trees, someone whispered his name. Elias Crowe. He raised his rifle. The hunt had already begun. The gunshot echoed across Black Creek Ranch. For several seconds, Elias Crowe didn't move. He stood on the porch with his rifle raised, listening to the darkness. Nothing. No second shot. No footsteps. Only the wind moving through the mesquite trees. Clara stepped closer. Was that one of them? Elias kept his eyes on the tree line. Maybe. You're not sure. I'm sure someone wants us to think they're here. He lowered the rifle. Then he turned toward the barn. Stay inside. Clara shook her head. No. Elias looked at her. No. I'm not hiding in your house while you walk into the dark. This isn't a discussion. My father died because men like these wanted him silent. If they're coming after me too, I need to know why. Elias studied her for a moment. Then he gave a small nod. Stay behind me. They walked toward the barn. The ground was wet beneath their boots. Elias moved slowly, scanning every shadow. The 2 horses were still standing there. But something was wrong. One saddle had been cut open. Elias ran his fingers over the leather. Someone searched the saddlebags. Clara looked around. Why? They're looking for something. The photograph? Maybe. Elias checked the ground. There were footprints leading away from the barn. Several men. At least 3. But then he noticed something else. A small metal object lay in the mud. He picked it up. A silver sheriff's badge. Clara stared at it. Is that Deputy Rusk's? Elias nodded. He wouldn't leave this behind. Then what happened to him? Elias didn't answer. He looked toward the darkness. Let's get inside. Back in the ranch house, Elias placed the photograph on the table. Clara sat across from him. The fire had almost gone out. Elias added another piece of wood. Orange light filled the room. He studied the 3 men in the photograph again. Nathan Crowe. Samuel Bell. Gideon Vale. 3 names connected by a secret that had survived 20 years. What do you know about Gideon Vale? Clara asked. Only what everyone knows. Tell me. He was a marshal. That isn't enough. Elias sighed. He was considered one of the best lawmen in Texas. He arrested bank robbers, broke up cattle theft rings, and supposedly cleaned up half a dozen towns. And then? He disappeared. How? Officially, he died while chasing a group of horse thieves. Clara looked at the photograph. But he didn't. No. How can you be sure? Because my father wouldn't have been standing beside a dead man. Clara leaned closer. Look at his hand. Elias looked. Gideon Vale was holding the black ledger. But something else was visible. A ring. A large silver ring with a strange symbol carved into it. A crow. Elias's face changed. My father had one. Had what? That ring. Clara looked surprised. You've seen it? Every day when I was a child. What happened to it? I don't know. Elias stood and walked toward an old cabinet. He opened a drawer and searched through several objects. Finally, he pulled out a small wooden box. He placed it on the table. Inside was an old pocket watch. A broken belt buckle. A faded photograph. And a piece of black cloth. Clara looked at him. What's that? My father's coat. Elias unfolded it. Sewn into the inside of the cloth was the same crow symbol. Clara's eyes widened. The ring and the symbol. Same mark. Why? I don't know. Elias sat down again. Then he remembered something. Wait. He picked up the photograph and examined the background. Behind the three men was a wooden building. Above the door was a sign. The letters were faded, but still visible. Mercy Ridge Mining Office. Clara looked at him. Mercy Ridge. Elias nodded. That's where my father took me when I was 10. You've been there? Once. Why? I don't remember. Clara frowned. You don't remember? I remember the road. I remember the mine. I remember my father telling me never to return. That's all. Elias stared at the photograph. No. A memory suddenly returned. A room. A wooden table. His father arguing with another man. A black ledger. And a sentence. If they discover what we've hidden, every man involved will come for us. Elias closed his eyes. The memory disappeared as quickly as it came. Clara touched his arm. Are you all right? I'm fine. You don't look fine. I remembered something. What? My father was afraid. Clara remained silent. Elias had never seen fear in his father's eyes before. Not until that moment. He had been a boy. He hadn't understood. Now he did. His father hadn't been afraid of the law. He had been afraid of the people behind it. Clara suddenly reached into her coat. There is something else. She placed a small brass key on the table. Elias stared at it. Where did you get that? My father gave it to me before he died. Why didn't you show me earlier? I didn't know what it opened. Elias picked it up. A tiny crow was carved into its head. His heart began pounding. This belonged to my father. Are you sure? I've seen this mark before. He turned the key over. There was a number engraved into the metal. 17. Clara whispered, what does that mean? Elias stood. Maybe a door. Where? Mercy Ridge. They both looked toward the photograph. Then a sound came from outside. A horse whinnied. Elias grabbed his rifle. This time there was no hesitation. He walked to the window. 3 riders stood on the distant ridge. Their silhouettes were black against the moonlight. Clara moved beside him. Are they watching us? Yes. How many? 3. Can they see us? They know we're here. One rider raised something. A rifle. Elias pulled Clara away from the window. A bullet smashed through the glass. The lamp exploded. Darkness filled the room. Elias fired once through the window. The riders immediately turned their horses. Within seconds, they disappeared behind the ridge. Clara's breathing was fast. Did you hit one? No. Why not? I wasn't trying to. She looked at him. Everyone says you never miss. Elias lowered his rifle. People say a lot of things. He walked toward the broken window. On the floor lay a small metal object. A bullet. Elias picked it up. He examined the casing. Then his expression became serious. This isn't a normal rifle round. What does that mean? It means whoever fired it wasn't here to scare us. Then why? Elias held the bullet in his palm. Because this was made for a very specific rifle. Clara waited. Elias looked at her. My father had one. A long silence followed. Clara whispered, your father's rifle? Yes. But he's been dead for 12 years. I know. Outside, thunder rolled across the plains. Elias returned to the table. He folded the photograph and placed it inside his coat. Then he took the brass key. We leave before sunrise. Where? Mercy Ridge. Clara nodded. But before either of them could move, Elias heard something. A faint scratching sound. Coming from beneath the floor. He froze. Clara noticed. What is it? Quiet. They listened. Scratch. 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 Something was moving underneath the house. Elias slowly lifted the floorboard beside the fireplace. A narrow space appeared. Inside was a small leather pouch. He pulled it out. The pouch was covered in dirt. He opened it. Inside was a folded piece of paper. Elias unfolded it. Only one sentence had been written. Nathan, if your son ever finds this, tell him Gideon Vale is still alive. Clara stared at the words. But that was written 20 years ago. Elias looked toward the dark window. Yes. Then why would someone write it? Elias folded the note. Because someone knew this day would come. Clara looked frightened for the first time. Do you think Gideon Vale is alive? Elias didn't answer. Instead, he walked to the old map hanging beside the fireplace. He pulled it down. Behind it was another piece of paper. A hand-drawn map. A road leading toward Mercy Ridge. At the bottom was another message. Do not trust the sheriff. Clara's face went pale. The sheriff? Elias nodded. Someone has been hiding this for years. Who? Elias stared at the map. I don't know. A loud knock suddenly came from the front door. Both of them froze. 3 knocks. Slow. Heavy. Exactly like the first time Clara had arrived. Elias raised his rifle. Stay behind me. He walked toward the door. Another knock. Then a man's voice came from outside. Elias Crowe. Elias recognized it immediately. Sheriff Amos Rusk. The most respected lawman in the county. The man who had officially investigated Samuel Bell's death. The man whose deputy had disappeared outside Black Creek Ranch. The sheriff called again. Open the door. Elias looked at Clara. She whispered, what do we do? Elias's eyes hardened. We find out how much he knows. He unlocked the door. But before he opened it, he noticed something beneath the crack. A black envelope had been pushed inside. Elias picked it up. On the front were 4 words. You were warned, Elias. He looked toward the door. Then the sheriff spoke again. You have until sunrise. Elias opened the envelope. Inside was a single photograph. His father. Standing beside Gideon Vale. But this photograph was different. It had been taken recently. Because behind them was a building Elias recognized immediately. Black Creek Ranch. And written across the bottom were 3 words. "He's watching you." The photograph slipped slightly from Elias Crowe's fingers. For several seconds, he simply stared at it. His father, Nathan Crowe, standing beside Gideon Vale. But that wasn't what frightened him. It was the building behind them. Black Creek Ranch. Elias recognized the porch. The wooden fence. Even the dead mesquite tree beside the barn. The photograph had been taken at his home. But there was something impossible about it. The photograph was clean. The edges weren't yellowed like the older picture. The paper wasn't cracked. It looked recent. Very recent. Clara stepped closer. "That's your ranch." Elias nodded. "When was this taken?" "I don't know." "Could it be old?" "No." He pointed toward the barn. "That barn wasn't built until after my father died." Clara looked at the photograph again. Her face slowly changed. "Then someone took this recently." Elias folded it. "Yes." "Of your father?" "Apparently." "But your father is dead." "I know." A loud knock came from the front door. Both of them froze. Sheriff Amos Rusk spoke from outside. "Elias. Open the door." Elias raised his rifle. Clara whispered, "Maybe we should tell him about the photograph." Elias shook his head. "No." "Why?" "Because I don't trust him." "How do you know?" Elias looked at the black envelope. "Because my father told me not to." Another knock. Harder this time. "Elias Crowe. I know you're in there." Elias walked toward the window. He moved the curtain slightly. 3 riders waited outside. Sheriff Amos Rusk sat in front. 2 armed deputies were behind him. But Elias noticed something strange. The sheriff's horse was clean. His deputies' horses were clean too. Yet the road outside was thick with mud. They hadn't ridden far. They had been waiting nearby. Watching. Elias lowered the curtain. "They've been here all night." Clara whispered, "How do you know?" "Their horses aren't tired." "What does that mean?" "They were waiting for us." The sheriff shouted again. "You have until sunrise, Crowe." Elias looked at the clock. 20 minutes until dawn. He turned toward Clara. "We're leaving." "Through the front?" "No." "Then how?" Elias walked toward the fireplace. He removed the map and lifted a loose wooden panel. Behind it was a narrow passage. Clara stared. "Where does that go?" "My father built it." "Where does it lead?" "Outside the ranch." They moved quickly. Elias grabbed his rifle, revolver, ammunition, and the black ledger. Clara packed the photograph and brass key. Before leaving, Elias looked around the house. For years, this had been the only place he considered home. Now he knew someone had been watching it. Maybe for years. They entered the hidden passage. Elias closed the panel behind them. Darkness swallowed them. The tunnel was narrow and smelled of damp earth. They moved carefully. Clara followed close behind. After several minutes, she whispered, "How old is this?" 20 years. Maybe more. "Why did your father build it?" "I don't know." "You seem to say that a lot." Elias almost smiled. "Because my father never explained anything." They continued walking. Then Clara stopped. "What?" "Look." She pointed toward the wall. Someone had carved something into the dirt. A crow. Underneath it were 3 letters. G.V. Gideon Vale. Elias touched the carving. It was fresh. Very fresh. He pulled his hand back. "Someone has been using this tunnel." Clara's voice dropped. Recently? Elias nodded. Maybe tonight. A faint sound came from behind them. Footsteps. Elias immediately raised his rifle. Clara froze. The footsteps stopped. Elias waited. Nothing. Then came another sound. A whisper. Elias. His blood went cold. He knew that voice. He had heard it only once in his life. When he was a child. His father's voice. Did you hear that? Clara whispered. Elias nodded. Someone said your name. They waited. Then silence returned. Elias moved forward. We keep going. Why? Because whoever is behind us wants us to stop. They reached the end of the tunnel. Elias pushed against a wooden door. It opened onto a dry creek bed behind the ranch. 2 horses waited there. Elias had prepared them earlier. They mounted quickly. Clara looked back. The ranch was barely visible through the trees. Sheriff Rusk and his deputies were still outside. They haven't found the tunnel. They will. Elias kicked his horse forward. They rode west. The sun began rising behind them. The sky turned orange. For the first time in hours, Clara relaxed. Then she noticed Elias wasn't looking forward. He was watching the ridge behind them. What? Riders. She turned. 3 men appeared on the ridge. Then 5. Then 7. Clara's face went pale. They followed us. Elias nodded. Keep riding. They pushed their horses harder. The trail toward Mercy Ridge was rough and narrow. Dust rose behind them. The riders were gaining. Elias looked ahead. A dry creek crossed the trail. Down there. They rode into the creek bed. The high banks hid them from view. Elias dismounted. Stay here. He walked toward the edge. The riders appeared above the bank. He counted them. 8. Sheriff Rusk wasn't among them. That worried him more. Who are they? Clara whispered. I don't know. They aren't deputies. No. What do they want? Elias looked at the men. Then he noticed the silver crow symbol on one rider's coat. His expression changed. That symbol. Clara looked. What does it mean? My father used it. Could they be working for him? My father has been dead 12 years. Then who? Elias didn't answer. One of the riders shouted. Find Crow. Another pointed toward the creek. They went this way. Elias grabbed Clara's arm. Run. They mounted again and rode through the creek bed. Bullets struck the dirt behind them. Clara ducked. Elias fired once toward the ridge. One rider fell backward. Clara looked at him. You said you never kill. I didn't. The rider was alive. Elias had shot the man's rifle out of his hands. They disappeared into a narrow canyon. The riders stopped following. For several minutes, neither Elias nor Clara spoke. Finally Clara said, You could have killed him. I could have. But you didn't. I don't kill people. Why? Elias stared ahead. My father taught me one thing before he died. What? Never become the man they say you are. Clara looked at him. What did he mean? I don't know. They continued toward Mercy Ridge. By late afternoon, the remains of the abandoned mining town appeared in the distance. Broken buildings stood like skeletons against the hills. A collapsed church. An old general store. Rusting mining equipment. And at the far end of the valley stood a small wooden cabin. Elias stopped. My father's cabin. Clara looked around. Nobody lives here. Not anymore. They dismounted. Elias approached the door. It was locked. He pulled out the brass key. It fit perfectly. The door opened. Inside was darkness. Dust covered the furniture. A broken chair lay beside the fireplace. Clara entered behind him. How long has this place been abandoned? Since my father died. Elias walked slowly across the room. Something felt wrong. The cabin didn't look untouched. A cup sat on the table. Still clean. A chair had recently been moved. The fireplace contained fresh ash. Clara noticed it too. Someone has been here. Elias nodded. He searched the room. Then he saw something carved into the floor. A crow. He knelt. Help me move this table. They pushed it aside. Underneath was a hidden wooden panel. Elias pried it open. Inside was a metal box. Clara whispered, "The ledger." Elias took out the brass key. It opened the box. Inside was a black leather ledger wrapped in cloth. Elias slowly lifted it. His hands trembled. He opened the first page. Names. Dates. Amounts of money. Land records. Bank transactions. Sheriff reports. Everything was connected. Samuel Bell. Nathan Crowe. Gideon Vale. And dozens of powerful men from Texas. Clara leaned over his shoulder. What were they doing? Elias turned the pages. Buying land. That's illegal. Not if the owners agree. They didn't. Elias looked at her. Look. Several pages contained names of families who had supposedly sold their land. But beside each name was another note. Dead. Missing. Forced to leave. Witness eliminated. Clara covered her mouth. My father found this. Yes. And they killed him because of it. Elias continued turning pages. Then he reached the final section. He stopped. His face became pale. Clara noticed. What? Elias didn't answer. She looked down. At the top of the page was the same date as the photograph. June 14, 1858. Below it were 4 names. Samuel Bell. Nathan Crowe. Gideon Vale. And then a 4th name. Clara stared at it. Her voice became a whisper. Elias. He looked. His own name was written there. Elias Crowe. Beside it was a note written in his father's handwriting. If Elias ever finds this book, he must know the truth before they find him. Clara looked at Elias. But you weren't even born in 1858. I know. Suddenly, a horse screamed outside. Both of them froze. Then another. Then another. Elias closed the ledger. He reached for his rifle. Clara whispered, "How many?" He moved toward the window. 8 riders surrounded the cabin. One man stepped forward. Elias recognized him immediately. Sheriff Amos Rusk. The sheriff raised his rifle. Elias Crowe. Elias didn't answer. Rusk shouted again. Hand over the ledger. Clara looked at Elias. How did he know? Elias stared at the black book. I think he's been waiting for it. A bullet smashed through the window. Clara screamed. Elias pulled her behind the wall. Another bullet struck the door. Rusk shouted from outside. You have nowhere to go. Elias looked around the cabin. Then he remembered something. His father's secret escape route. Behind the fireplace. He grabbed Clara's hand. Come on. They moved the old wooden table. A hidden door appeared beneath the fireplace. Elias opened it. A narrow tunnel disappeared into darkness. Clara looked at him. Where does it lead? Somewhere they can't follow. Behind them, the cabin door exploded open. Men stormed inside. Elias and Clara disappeared into the tunnel. But before Elias closed the hidden door, he looked back. Sheriff Rusk stepped into the cabin. He wasn't looking for them. He was smiling. Because he had already found what he wanted. The photograph. Rusk held it up. Too late, Crowe. Then he turned toward his men. They have the ledger. One man asked, who? Rusk looked toward the hidden passage. The boy. Far inside the tunnel, Elias and Clara continued through the darkness. Clara whispered, what did he mean by the boy? Elias stopped. He opened the ledger again. His father's message was still there. If Elias ever finds this book, he must know the truth before they find him. Below it was another sentence. A sentence Elias hadn't noticed before. He read it slowly. Then his face went completely pale. Clara looked at him. What does it say? Elias couldn't speak. She took the ledger. Her eyes moved across the page. Then she whispered the words aloud. Elias Crowe is not my son. Neither of them moved. Behind them, footsteps entered the tunnel. And somewhere ahead in the darkness, a match suddenly flared. Someone was already waiting for them.